shoes to fill. This is Tom Price here at the studios of EWTN in Alabama, filling in for Patrick Coffin, who has the day off. Our phone number today is 888-318-7884 if you have a question for our guest. And we have a wonderful guest this hour. It is Robert Lockwood. And the topic today that Bob is going to tackle, 10 books every Catholic should read. And before we get into the 10, let me tell you a little about Mr. Lockwood. He has held a number of positions with the great folks at Our Sunday Visitor, including all the way up to editor-in-chief, publisher, president. He resigned from there after 28 years of service, an amazing thing. He is currently a member of the Catholic League's Board of Advisors, the director of communications for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and he's a columnist and general manager of a wonderful newspaper, the Pittsburgh Catholic. His most recent book, A Guy's Guide to the Good Life, Virtues for Men. Bob has won numerous awards from the Catholic Press Association for his column Catholic Journal, as well as some great feature writing and editing. He received the first annual Cardinal Cushing Award from the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. That was for support of Catholic research. He was recognized by the Catholic Press Association for distinguished contributions to Catholic journalism in nomination for the 2000 St. Francis de Sales Awards. Those are big things, Bob.
Boy, it sounds pretty impressive. I can tell you, if I didn't know me, I'd be very impressed.
Well, I will try not to be too overly intimidated because you and I have done radio for a while, so we will get to the meat of this. And as I'm looking at this, certainly a provocative title. 10 books every Catholic should read, and I probably have my favorite 10, just like you do, and our listeners do too. Why? What provoked you, if you wish, to put together such a list?
Well, probably because I'm a bit of a sadist, or a masochist, I should say, because I was thinking just before we went on that an article I did for great fun a few years back was a all-time list of Catholic all-star baseball team. Okay?
Oh my. Wow.
And I'm still getting mail on that, on who I didn't pick and how come I picked this guy instead of that guy. So
Sure.
I think I'm just looking for trouble. But the joy of this, even when I had been discussing it with some friends and everything else, is that we realized this could be 200 books.
Oh,
so, 2,000 books. So what I tried to do, once we get into it, is to look a little bit at it from the sense of, what were the books that had an extraordinary impact on the people of God.
Sure.
The books that made a real difference in the way people, if you will, perceive their faith and live their faith. So, there'll be an extraordinary number of truly vital books of philosophy and theology that probably will not be included. I didn't include Aquinas Summa Theologica, which is, an astounding book of incredible importance in the life of the church. Mm-hmm. But again, I was trying to get at what made that difference in the ordinary person's life. And I tried to, I admit I had you'll see a certain prejudice toward the last couple of hundred years too, to try to see how the church and the faith adapted's probably the wrong word, but how the faith would be explained in the modern world. And so those were kind of the prejudices that I brought to this list. But of course, I'll be just as interested to hear what you have to say and what the callers in have to say. It's a fun thing to talk about. And one other thing I should mention: this is not, the 10 books I mentioned are not going to be ranked in order of importance. We'll assume that they're all equally important.
So this is not a Casey Kasem list where we're counting them down to number one. Okay.
No. Yeah, I will not expect a drum roll when I get to the last one. So.
Fair enough.
Okay.
And I want to give people our phone number here in case they want to ring in early on this to chime in with perhaps what their favorite is and maybe even take issue with you on a book or two. Our phone number is 888-318-7884. If you're a reader, this is going to be a fascinating hour for you. So let's jump into this list and give me the first book on your list.
Well, the first book I don't think could be a big surprise. It's Augustine's Confessions. Okay. St. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo, from 354 to 430. The book was roughly around 400. Now, again, Augustine, City of God, unknown, beautiful sermons, so much there. I picked Confessions because, in essence, it is a biography of the conversion of a soul. And every biography such as that has come since, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, in essence, it's Augustine all over again. It's telling that story of how a soul is moved, how we move through our lives, and how the pilgrimage, in a sense, ends. And this is a book, I mean, it's amazing to think of it being written 1,600 years ago.
Yeah.
And the power that it still holds. And, of course, Augustine is a writer in the translations that, how can I put it, that we're all comfortable with. It's astounding that we're reading something, that's 200 years prior to Gregory the Great.
Yeah.
And we can read it and draw so much out of it. That's what, as we'll find with so many of these books, is that each of them have untold number of editions that have been published, untold number of publishers, writers and great writers who have gone in to translate them again, to try to pull the richness out. And I just consider Augustine's Confessions really to be the kind of landmark story of conversion.
I really think there's something for everybody. Certainly not every person who picks the book up has done some of the terrible things, without going into detail, that Augustine did, but everybody understands the point of view of, oh man, did I blow it. This is where I went wrong, and how blessed I am to be able to find my way to God. Right,
and that sense of that beautiful poem, that sense of the hound of heaven, that we may give up on ourselves, but God never gives up on us. And of course, the lovely story of Monica. And you read all the horrible things that he did to his mother,
Oh, boy.
Just left her unsure. Bye, Mom. That kind of thing. And, people have fun quoting, from Augustine's, Lord, just don't save my soul now,
Yeah, not today.
Not today. But we all have, that's what we love about Augustine, because this great mind, this great hero, this great soul in the church, he went through the same difficulties that all of us 1,600 years later have experienced in our lives, whether it be doubt, temptation, certainly sin, hopefully not on the grand scale, but sin still.
Sure.
And yet the grace was always there. His life was being pulled. And when he reached his true happiness is when, if you will, he allowed the hound of heaven to catch up with him. It's just an incredible story that, I kid sometimes that, half the country western songs are still throwbacks to Augustine, talking about our sins and what we did wrong and how we finally sobered up and got back on the good life. And so Augustine's impact on history, on philosophy, on theology, and on the very story of faith is just astounding. It's a book we should all be aware of.
There you go. We're speaking with Robert Lockwood about 10 books every Catholic should read. We're counting them down, like Casey would say. And let me give you our phone number in case you'd like to chime in on this, 888-318-7884. Bob, what is book number 22222?
Okay, and what I'm doing with this is, again, I'm doing this in kind of chronological order.
Oh, okay. All right.
It doesn't have to be this way again. And now this one might get people thinking a little bit and maybe even disagreeing. But my second one, chronologically, is The Divine Comedy.
Uh-huh. Dante
Alighieri, 1265, 1321. Book was basically completed, I think, about 1318, right around the time that he died. Now this it's the basic book of course is the idea of a pilgrimage through heaven, purgatory, hell, purgatory, and heaven. And again, it takes on that theme, like Augustine did, of a life as a pilgrimage, life as moving through. There's some of the greatest poetry, Catholic poetry, if you will. We all probably remember that, class that we took in college where we had to read Dante for the first time. And, it's probably one of the most famous opening lines in literature. While halfway through the journey of our life, I found myself lost in a darkened forest, for I had wandered off from the straight path. How I entered there, I cannot truly say. I had become so sleepy at the moment when I first strayed, leaving the path of truth. Now, the thing with the Divine Comedy that is so amazing is that it gives us a picture of the understanding of faith, what our Catholic belief was, when it was, in essence, if you will, when the faith was universal. There was no, right. This was pre-Reformation.
Sure.
The depth of the faith is extraordinary. And more than that, because we lose sight of this sometimes, the expression of the faith, we all know exactly what he's talking about. We all know that faith that is reflected in what he says. Certainly he'll get into a few, philosophical things that now might strike our ear funny. But the expression of the faith, the depth of belief, he talks about the virtues, faith, hope, and love, all the things that we would find, if you will, ordinary expressions of the faith. They're there. They are all there, and we marvel at that. Now, there's a lot in it that will throw us. Dante is not a saint, okay?
Right.
And he had a lot of axes to grind. That's part of almost the humor in it, is seeing, when you read the footnotes, because you have to read it with a good explanatory volume of who he's referring to and all that, all his political enemies, stuff like that. And that includes the Pope, okay? Which he felt had taken, it has nothing to do with theology. It has to do with, if you will, Italian peninsula politics, in the 13th century. And, he has his axes to grind.
Okay.
But the incredible expressions of faith throughout this, and a Catholic world world view, if you will. It is absolutely extraordinary. It's, again, considered one of the greatest works of Western civilization, Western literature. We all might remember that it was the first great work in the Italian, in the common tongue, if you will. And again, it's carried with it, like Augustine's Confessions, this extraordinary sense of so much of literature and theology. Well, again, I say theology. Expressions of faith find their roots in the way Dante tells his story. It is really, I consider it a marvelous book, and I just reread it. Actually, when I was doing my own book, A Guy's Guide to the Good Life, Virtues for Men, which is not on my top 10 list, by the way. Okay. But just want to make that clear. Okay. But I integrated Dante's pilgrimage as kind of the motif to carry through my book, because I just felt that, wow, it's all there,
Sure.
And it says it in so many ways, sometimes better than I could. So I went for Dante. Some people might take exception with that, because again, there's a lot of politics, even some humor that we might even consider, off color and in bad taste, but all of it had a great reason, and there's some of the greatest lines of poetry, including, of course, the famous "Abandon hope, all you who enter here."
Sure.
As on the doorstep to hell, if you will.
I remember,
it's an incredible book.
I remember when our son was in like 9th or 10th grade, he was eating it up like candy. He just thought it was fantastic and still enjoys it. Well,
right.
We're going to take our first break, Bob, and when we come back, we'll tackle the other 8 books on your list, and we would love to hear from you, the listener, if you have some favorites that you would like to add to this list. Our phone number is 888-318-7884. Lots more to come here on Catholic Answers Live. And we're going to go back to the phones. One person, Bob, before we continue the list, one person, Kathy from El Dorado, she was not able to be on the air for us. Perhaps she had some time restraints there, but she wanted to mention the book, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis, and I know that is on your list.
That is on my list. Maybe what we can do is, why don't I go through quickly our remaining 8 books?
That's a great idea.
And then we can just kind of pop back and discuss each of them individually, or then the listeners will know the full 10 that I picked, and then they can tear me up.
Yeah, well, they may have an issue with you here and there, but I think your selections here are very solid. So let's kind of whip through these. What do we have besides The Imitation of Christ, Augustine's Confessions, and the Divine Comedy?
Okay, the next is Francis de Sales on the Introduction to the Devout Life.
Okay.
After that, I kind of jump ahead. I have Apologia Pro Vita Sua by Cardinal John Henry Newman. Okay?
All right.
Then I have Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. Story of a Soul by Teresa of Lisieux.
Okay.
The one of my favorites that you don't see talked about as much anymore is Diary of a Country Priest by Georges Bernard. Oh, excuse me, my French is horrible. Bernanot. Okay. And then we have Evangelion Vitae by Pope John Paul II, and then the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Wow. Well, I'm actually amazed that I've actually read 3 of those books. I'm not going to say which ones they are, because I'm sure that some people would say, well, why didn't you mention the Bible? And so I'll just pour a little cold water right there. And why didn't you mention the Bible, Bob?
Earlier in the show, I mentioned about doing the Catholic All-Stars, you know. Yes. And that was like saying, why didn't you mention Babe Ruth? You know, certain things are a given.
Okay.
You know, and that the Bible was just simply understood.
Well, fair enough.
I would assume that. I was looking for books, how can I put it? Books with more human authors.
Sure. And I think the appeal to at least to me of a list like this is that you're gonna pick out some books like the Confessions and Divine Comedy, and you go sure. But then when you see that little gem that's on your list or somebody else's list that you've never heard of, it makes you go, huh, what's that? And that kind of piques the interest. Now, I know that besides these 10, you also had a few others. And when I looked at your bubbling under list, if you will, there was one that you mentioned called Mr. Blue, which I had never heard of. So I did a little research, and that looks fascinating to me personally. So I'm going to look into that one.
Oh, that's a wonderful book, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Because again, you know, we always, when we magically pick that number 10, that means some have to get left off. Mr. Blue by Miles Connolly is, it's a novel, and it's of a will-o'-the-wisp, St. Francis of Assisi type contemporary Catholic story, of course told in the 1920s, but of a man of very rich faith and how he lived his faith with, you know, one of the words we abuse now kind of is the word joy, because joy, you know, it's kind of like an impulsive jolt. Oh boy, we're happy about something. Oh boy. Yeah. Joy is almost a mystical term in a Catholic understanding. It means a real divine joy that senses a closeness to God, of God alive in us. And that's what Mr. Blue is. And it's a fun read. Excuse me, it's poetic. And again, this is a book you can give to an 8th grader. Okay?
Do you think,
easy to understand.
Do you think there is somewhat of the autobiographical tinge to that book? Because I understand that the author was kind of that way himself in his real life.
Yes, even though, you know, he mixed it up in the real world. He was out in, you know, in Hollywood and all that. But again, much like Diary of a Country Priest, although it was not written by a priest, we're so taken by the depth of the faith that could write such a book. And this is also a little bit like Story of a Soul by Teresa of Lisieux, is that the idea is that circles and runs through Diary of a Country Priest, Story of a Soul, and Mr. Blue, is living an extraordinary faith in the ordinary, you know, where life becomes a celebration of not doing grand and heroic things, or, check that, things that do not appear to others necessarily to be grand and heroic. But when the faith is lived, it's by its nature an heroic act. And that's what we really see in those books. Diary of a Country Priest, which is a beautiful book that's kind of, well, a little like Mr. Blue. It's kind of slipped off the radar a little bit. But that was written in, I think it was 1936, by a Frenchman who died in 1948. And again, it's this, what it says. It's this diary of a priest. It's a fictional account, okay? But a diary of a priest. He's got health problems. He's young. He's kind of buried, kind of reminds you of Jean Vianney. He's kind of buried in a little town in France where things are dull, the people are dull. He perceives himself as dull. He questions to a degree what good am I doing in these people's lives? You know, he teaches catechism to young girls, and the girls kind of make fun of him as kind of a, you know, what we might call a nerd today, you know. And yet, as you progress through this diary, it's such a marvelous story of living the faith, of grace, of hope, of belief, and how this simple life, doing simple things, begins to touch so many people. There's a beautiful end to it, if you will, with his line that grace is everywhere. You know, and this is truly a marvelous book, which, by the way, if you want to cheat, there's a beautiful movie that was made out of it in 1951. Okay. Very, very simple movie that's received huge critical awards and everything else. So this is really a classy movie. It's of the same name, Diary of a Country Priest. But you know, that's one of the books that we lost a little bit, and we need to get it back.
My thinking here, as you were describing the life of this country priest, I'm thinking, wow, there are parallels here to Goodbye, Mr. Chips.
Yes.
If you think about the simple life that Mr. Chips was leading as a school teacher, and he probably felt like, well, I'm not touching anybody, but in effect he was touching everybody. Right,
and that the grace and that touch of divine joy is found in what we do every day, even though it may seem mundane. And as in Goodbye, Mr. Chips, if we look around, you know, and say, what have I done? You know, what difference has my life made? You know, we can get kind of American with it and think of Jimmy Stewart and It's a Wonderful Life.
Just thinking of that, absolutely.
Yeah, everybody was running off. You know, his brother becomes a war hero. His friend becomes this great successful businessman, and he's stuck back there in this little backwater town, you know, chugging along from day to day and wondering, you know, what did I do with my life? I wanted to do great and heroic things, and I didn't do anything. And he discovers more than anything else that he had a wonderful life. This is that story told, but with such a richness of faith. The author is just an extraordinary guy. He had written a few other things. One of his, I had a great quote. It's not from the book, but he was talking about, what he said was, faith is not a thing which one loses. We merely ceased to shape our lives by it, which I thought is kind of a definition of what, or kind of an observation that fits today so very well.
Sure.
You know, people don't really lose their faith. They just cease shaping their lives by it. And Diary of a Country Priest is a story of shaping your life by the faith. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book.
Very good, very good. We're talking with Robert Lockwood about 10 books every Catholic should read. If you have a question for Bob or anything along these lines, give us a call at 888-318-7884. We're going to take a call before we go to our second break. Here is Mary in San Diego listening online, Catholic.com. Hello, Mary.
Hi, Mr. Lockwood. How are you?
Hi, Mary. How are you?
Good, thank you. I wanted to know if you could recommend any good works of fiction with Catholic themes.
Those were, now, Diary of a Country Priest, that I just mentioned, that is a work of fiction. Mr. Blue, it's by Miles Connolly, and you can get these books. They are still in print, okay? Just kind of knock into Amazon, and those are two that I would recommend very, very strongly. Now, there's some other contemporary ones with a strong Catholic theme. There's, well, when I say contemporary, you have to understand I'm a history major, so my idea of contemporary is, within 100 years. But there's the Bridge over San Luis Rey, and if somebody will jump in and remember the name of the author, I'm suddenly blanking on that. But that is also a wonderful book.
Mm-hmm. Great. What about maybe for young adults specifically?
Young adults would love Mr. Blue. They would absolutely love Mr. Blue. Now, Diary of a Country Priest might be a little heavy. I don't want to overstate that, but they may not be able to see the richness that's in it. But Mr. Blue, they would get a kick out of.
Hey, great.
It's a great book. It's not very big. It's not a big, challenging read. Nice and simple, beautifully told.
Thank you.
All right, Mary, thank you for calling.
Thank you, Mary.
And we appreciate hearing from you there in San Diego, the mothership of Catholic Answers.
That's right.
That's right. When we come back from our break, we'll go to Paul listening in Santa Rosa, California. Before we go back to the phones, Bob, I'm going to hit that list just so that people who just tuned in know what we're talking about. The books are Augustine's Confessions, The Imitation of Christ, Thomas A. Kempis, Evangelion Vitae, one of your all-time favorites, John Paul the Great, The Divine Comedy from Dante, Diary of a Country Priest, Chesterton's Orthodoxy, also Introduction to the Devout Life, Francis de Sales, The Story of a Soul from The Little Flower, The Catechism of the Catholic Church, and Newman's Apologia. And so that is a wonderful list, and we're going to go now to... Well, let's see here. Who do we have? Paul from Santa Rosa, California, listening to Sirius Satellite EWTN. Hi, Paul.
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Hi, Paul.
Good afternoon. I had a question about the author Louis DeWall. If you knew anything about his background, I've come across and actually purchased one of his books, although I haven't read it yet. I was just curious if you could share a little light on his background. Was he raised Catholic or was he a convert, and what you thought of him as an author?
What's the title of the book? Do you recall it?
I do. It's called The Living Wood.
Boy, I'm going to confess ignorance. Okay. I'm not aware of it. How's that for being horribly unhelpful?
Well, I just was listening to you about the different books you were sharing about, and I thought maybe you might know something about him. But
I'm so sorry that I can't help you with that one. Maybe there's a listener out there who might call in and be able to offer something.
Sorry about that, Paul.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. God bless you.
Thank you for checking in. Let's go to Henry, listening in Palm Beach, Florida, to Divine Mercy Radio, one of our great EWTN stations. Hello, Henry.
Hello there. And this is Palm Bay. It's Palm Bay, Florida, not Palm Beach.
I beg your pardon.
Anyway, I was just curious what you thought of the Joshua series.
I think they're absolutely some of the worst books ever written.
Really?
Oh, I just loathe them. I think when you really, I shouldn't say that about any author, but I find the books to be un-Catholic. They, as you read into them, there's always this presentation of the Joshua/Jesus character that 90% of the time he seems to be arguing against the what I would call the Orthodox Catholic understanding of things, and kind of reduces it down to a mushy, well, just a mushy nothing. I guess I'm not understating myself. I just didn't care for them. And I know a lot of people have read them, and anything that gets people thinking of faith and the application of faith, it's hard to argue against. I just didn't consider them very good books at all. I don't think that you have to water down the faith to present it in a dynamic, joyous, exciting way.
And I was also going to ask about Father Andrew Greeley's work, his fictional novels.
I think they're meant to be on a bestseller list.
Okay, so they wouldn't be considered Catholic works then, even though they're written by.
No, I mean, I think he would argue that, but I just think that they're more pop books with a Catholic overlay. You know, if you read Chesterton's Father Brown mysteries, you find a real richness of the faith there. I think Father Greeley's books are more just pop stories with holy water sprinkled on them.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you very much.
Thank
God
you.
bless. Thank
you, Henry. Let's move on to Mark, listening to EWTN on Sirius in Saskatchewan. Hi, Mark. Mark, are you there? Hey, Mark.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you thought of Thomas More, and he's got a book called Care of the Soul. I was just about to read it. I was wondering what you think of him.
Anything by Moore is great. Anything by Moore. I you know, again, you're the first one who really nailed me. How come you don't have Thomas More on the list? And my reason is I should have. Moore's just great. Anything that he did, plus reading some really good biographies of him, you know, I just couldn't recommend it more. Thanks so much for bringing it up.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for listening to us in Canada. Let's move on now to Marion in Yorba Linda, California, listening online, EWTN.com. Hi, Marion.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering if you could recommend a sort of daily book on lives of the saints, like you could read a little bit of the Saints' Day, like today would be, you know, like St. Joseph's Day.
You know, there are so many good, you know, good contemporary books on lives of the saints. I tend to say go back to Father Alban Butler's Lives of the Saints. That is one of the real critical early collections of the lives of the saints. You know, you can get it multi-volume, but you can get it one volume. But the lives told, they're not long, you know, drawn out 30-page presentations. Nothing like that. But Butler's Lives of the Saints is the classic collection of lives, and it's something you could certainly do as a daily reading.
And do you think that's a good form of meditation, prayer?
Oh, I think it is so wonderful. I have never been one myself who's been very good, as I say, at spontaneous prayer, except maybe to scream help. Okay, and I've found that reading of the saints, reading what the saints said, and of course reading scripture or liturgy of the hours or things like that. This is wonderful prayer. Wonderful prayer. All these books that I discussed today, these really are books of prayer. When you read them, you will feel yourself growing in faith. So I certainly think if that is what you would like to do to enhance your prayer life, you're taking a wonderful, wonderful step.
Well, thank you so much for your advice.
Marion, if I can jump in with one more, and that would be Voices of the Saints, written by our friend Bert Gezzi. That book is available pretty much anywhere, including from our own EWTN Religious Catalog. A wonderful book, probably about 2 pages for each of the saints as it progresses through the year. So that might be another one to look at. Voices of the Saints by Bert Gezzi. Okay?
I would
much.
definitely say that. Bert's an old and dear friend and a wonderful writer.
Well, there you go. Thanks, Marion. I think we have time for one more call. Joanne in Grand Island, Nebraska, but she's not quite screened yet. While we're getting that one up, I think the most recent book in the list for you, Bob Lockwood, is Evangelion Vitae by John Paul II.
Right. It's kind of a tie with the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But Evangelion Vitae, I so recommend that if people have not read that, to pick it up and read it. It's a beautiful, beautiful encyclical by the Holy Father, by Pope John Paul II. that simply put, it answers the most critical questions we face in our times, which is the inviolable worth of every human life. And it is so beautifully presented to answer this whole sense of how lost we are in contemporary society. Who am I? What does my life mean? Everything that this great existential loneliness that we all feel. Evangelion Vitae is just a beautiful, beautiful work, and it's not a difficult read. Sometimes Pope John Paul II can be a little tough,
sure,
but that is not.
Bob, we're all out of time. Thank you for your wonderful list today, and thanks for joining us.
God bless for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.